Tonight, on the world's most amazing videos, two mountain bikers live life on the edge until one goes over.
Oh, that's a helmet. Oh.
Plus, arena football fans fight over a game ball. And a woman gets hammered to the turf. Then, a fired-up protester voices her anger, but cops drown her out. And sprint cars battle at blistering speeds when a collision sparks catastrophe. Later, a raging beast breaks up a high-stakes game of poker. These are the incredible true-life stories of people who face their most desperate hour and live to tell about it. Everything you are about to see is real. Real people, real danger, real excitement. Get ready to experience the thrill of a lifetime. You are about to witness the world's most amazing videos.
Acumba, California. Miles, Todd, and three buddies mountain bike in the treacherous Carrizo Canyon Gorge.
Film your camera. A bunch of them down in the trail.
It's an extremely steep, rocky canyon, and there are sections where you have to go around which are extremely challenging, narrow, very rocky, and very, very steep.
Touch it.
Today, the trail is even more hazardous than usual.
The storms of that winter had eroded even further and rendered it even less rideable than before.
One slip could mean disaster.
Oh, Lisa! Oh, dude. You not gonna try it? Look at the penalty for failure, dude. Yeah, I'll try. It is worse than it was, definitely.
If you misstep, you would easily fall quite a distance.
Miles' friends managed to make it along that difficult stretch.
That's a hell of a job, Miles. That's a hell.
They wait for Miles to follow.
Be careful, that's a hell of a... Oh.
Miles' bike hits a rock and stops short. When he puts his foot down, the trail gives way beneath him.
When I first realized I was going over the edge and there was no avoiding it, I actually thought at that moment that I was going to die. I thought that was it.
Be careful, that's a hell of a...
I fell over sideways and hit my shoulder on these rocks and then sort of flipped and hit some more rocks. And at this point I was just reaching and trying to grab anything I could, any rock, any bush, anything to stop my fall. And I guess about 150 feet later I finally did.
Be careful, that's a hell of a... You all right? Did you film it? Yeah. No, hey,
just sit down, sit down, sit down, sit down.
For a minute, Miles, until you know everything's connected.
Sit down, Miles.
Oh my God. Miles, sit down. Sit down.
Now Miles has to crawl his way back up.
Climbing out was extremely hard. I had broken my right hand and sprained my left wrist. Honestly, I was just so happy to be alive at that point. And I had achieved something amazing in that I had managed to be tough enough to fall 150 feet and not die from it.
Careful, that's the helmet. Oh, oh, oh. Oh, oh.
Orlando, Florida. The visiting Georgia force scores a touchdown. The receiver tries to toss the ball to a woman in the stands, but a rowdy fan intercepts it. That doesn't fly with the woman's husband. Tempers flare. Without warning, the woman is knocked from the stands. Watch again. The lady tries to break up the brawl, but a fan shoves her back, right onto the field. Players rush to aid the stunned woman. Security steps in to separate the troublemakers. An intoxicated bully is ejected from the game. It started as a fan-friendly gesture. But thanks to one bad sport, it ended with a black eye for the game. Calder Racetrack, Melbourne, Australia. The first lap of the Stock Car Championship. Drivers jockey their 600 horsepower rides for lead position. Cars pound against each other as they try to get ahead. And then, Craig Lowndes' car flips and does an inverted grind down the track. The car then goes into a mad tumble. 5 nasty neck-snapping rolls. Craig's just along for the ride.
When you've lost control of any race car, you become a passenger. And as it started to barrel roll, that's when I got very nervous. I didn't know what direction I was going in, and that's probably the scariest moment of any race driver.
The car crashes to a stop. Craig's fellow racers run to his aid.
Look at the drivers running down.
Through the entire ordeal, Craig manages to keep it together.
Crompton in there, they're all concerned for the...
I remember actually being upside down at that point, radioing to the boys saying, look, I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm fine.
Craig's lucky. He only hurt his knee. But he'll always carry the images of that day with him to the starting line.
The scariest moment of my racing career, because I had no idea whether we were going to die or survive, and that for me was a pretty scary moment.
To the outside.
Oh, that was a great
Coming up, a bicycle daredevil tries a stunt with no helmet and cracks his skull in a sickening thud.
Oh, did he hit?
Plus, workers stage a raucous protest, but their angry cries are washed out. And later, a sprint car crash triggers one of the worst chain collisions in track history. When the world's most amazing videos continues.
Seattle, Washington. Jimmy Levan is one of BMX's best. But even he knows that the best can have a bad day.
Definitely believe BMX is very dangerous, but it's a good time. We all get hurt and pay the price, but it's just part of the deal.
Today, he's setting up for a daring jump. But Jimmy's having second thoughts.
What was hard about this rail was the fact that it was pretty tall and 33 stairs and pretty steep.
Still, he's determined to pull it off.
When you're really going to do something, you need to have the confidence that you're going to do it.
Jimmy sets aside his fear. He goes for it.
Oh, he hit.
Jimmy is going too fast. He hits the rail with the wheel instead of the bike's frame. His head slams the pavement. He goes into convulsions.
Oh, he hit.
Usually right when you realize something's going wrong, time does seem to slow down for a second. Next thing you know, he woke up in an ambulance.
The accident is hard on his friends, too.
My friends were pretty teary-eyed. They thought I might have been done, but it was all right.
Jimmy's got a blown-out knee, sprained wrist, broken ribs, and a major concussion. Still, he knows it could have been worse.
I feel lucky to be alive. Every day is a good one.
Oh my God!
Bindora Dam, Australia. A pair of fire rescue helicopters practice water bombing drops for the upcoming fire season. Something is wrong. One of the chopper crews is suddenly missing. Pilot Mike Tom circles back to where he last saw the other chopper. And then, a sickening sight. There on the water, on its side, a missing helicopter. Worse, there's no sign of life. Sitting next to Mike is Airman Ewan McKenzie. Mike lowers his chopper. Ewan jumps to rescue the downed pilot. The waters are choppy. Ewan makes a frantic dive to free pilot Duncan Patrick from the cockpit. He's got him. But Duncan's unconscious and not breathing. Ewan pulls the lifeless man to shore. Others swim out to help. It's exhausting work and a race against time. Duncan still isn't breathing. They finally reach shore. He doesn't look good. Ewan and the others take turns trying to revive Duncan. Then, a miracle. Duncan starts breathing on his own. Paramedics arrive. They race Duncan to a nearby hospital. He survives. Ewan receives the Bravery Cross for his actions. But his greatest reward is helping a friend when he needed it most. Santiago, Chile. Police use water cannons to break up a protest by government workers. The demonstrators want higher wages. Cops want them off the streets. Some protesters flee. Others get steamed. This man spits back, then fights back. He'll cool off in jail. Some huddled in fear, still defiant. One woman actually stands up to police. She blows a whistle to rally supporters. And then she takes a direct hit to the face. The blast is so strong, the woman is knocked to the ground. In the end, cops restore order. But water alone can't cool the heated demands for justice.
Up next, a record-setting skydive takes a terrifying turn when two chutes get tangled in a deadly spin. Then, a helpless man fights for his life when he's attacked by a gang of murderous thugs. And later, a snowmobiler's high-flying 360 comes up painfully short. When the world's most amazing videos returns.
10,000 feet above Davis, California. 34 skydivers join in a diamond formation. It's a spectacular and very dangerous maneuver. One wrong move means disaster. Cameraman Brian Scott spots trouble right away.
As I'm watching the formation build, I noticed the formation just seemed a little soft and soggy. It didn't look square. That could have meant that the airspeed wasn't as high as on some previous dives.
One skydiver attempts to take his place on the outside of the formation, but he loses control. Suddenly, he's tangled in another diver's lines. Both chutes collapse. Now the pair is locked in a death spiral.
It started going on longer and longer, and I knew that there was a problem, that he somehow couldn't get something cut off.
Brian can only watch as they plunge toward the ground at nearly 100 miles an hour.
We started out, I think, at around 9,500 feet. I looked out at the horizon, I said, we're getting rather low, and I looked at my altimeter, and we were at about 1,000 feet.
One skydiver manages to free himself. But Alan Gutschall is still hopelessly tangled. He spins violently. He's on the verge of a blackout. But Alan keeps his cool and takes out a knife. He desperately tries to cut himself free, but the knife breaks.
That's just the piece of gear that we all live and die by. I was getting nervous as we passed through 1,000 feet.
Amazingly, Alan has a second knife. He cuts the lines and pulls his reserve chute, only 500 feet from certain death. Incredibly, he insists on jumping again.
When we got to the ground, we were all just ecstatic, and we were ready for the next skydive. Alan's back in the air that afternoon.
It's a terrifying ordeal, but any jump is a good one when you can walk away. Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania.
Green is out. Lance to the lead.
Tiny sprint cars tear up the track at the Williams Grove Speedway. Then car number 12 comes up from behind. Up and over. The race car is hurled end over end. It shreds. Shards of jagged steel cut across the path of the other drivers. They're hitting 120 miles an hour as they slam into the wreckage. Car number 12 only stops rolling when another sprinter takes flight, then crashes down on top of it. Track workers separate the cars with their bare hands. Thankfully, there are no drivers crushed at the bottom of the wreck. They're lucky to be alive after their sprint cars were reduced to a pile of scrap. Las Vegas, Nevada. 2 a.m. on the Strip. The man in the cowboy hat is a gardener at the nearby hotel casino. He's minding his own business when suddenly a man in a baseball cap sneaks up and smashes the gardener in the jaw. 10 other men jump in. It's a savage gang attack. The man manages to break away, but the thugs chase him down. It's now 15 against 1. They surround him, unleashing a vicious barrage of blows. The attackers finally run away. Incredibly, the man gets to his feet. He walks away with a broken jaw and collarbone. Police use this video to make arrests. They say the gardener was simply the unfortunate victim of random violence. One of the most brutal and bizarre attacks this city has ever seen. Vancouver, British Columbia. A horrifying scene. 9-year-old Cody Bonnard is trapped on a ledge with his dog named Chaos. The North Vancouver Fire and Rescue Team responds.
He was on the edge of a cliff, which was probably 75 to 100 feet down onto further rocks. So he was in a pretty precarious position, and the rocks, especially this time of year, are quite slippery and they're covered in moss.
Cody tries to hang on to the shaking dog and keep from falling.
We are involved in a lot of rescues in the canyons in this area, and some are, regrettably, their body retrievals.
Like, every time Chaos would move, I would tell him to not, but I would start slipping. It was terrifying. It was absolutely terrifying.
At last, help arrives.
All I heard was, "Set up quickly, set up quickly."
They just set up their descent line and put one of the rescuers in a harness and give him another harness to put the boy in. And they also took along a net to put the dog in.
One mistake and 3 lives could be lost. Finally, Cody and Chaos are safe.
I owe these guys my life.
Cody was on that cliff for more than an hour. But he'd do it again if it meant saving the life of his best friend.
This was something that I needed to do. I wasn't thinking about myself at that very second. I was thinking more of the dog.
Coming up, a world-famous Daredevil flies off a ramp and lands in a bone-crushing heap. Then, a female skydiver fights for her life when she gets tangled in deadly high-voltage power lines. And later, when cowboys play poker with a one-ton bull, the angry beast goes all in. When the world's most amazing videos continues.
Daredevil Kerry Hart gets his kicks doing backflips. But at this show in Providence, it nearly cost him his life. Kerry hits the jump and launches straight up, but he loses his grip on the handle. He bails out in midair and brutally slams the dirt. Kerry breaks several ribs. His signature backflip is now known as the Heartbreaker. Moscow, Russia. Steelworkers used blowtorches to disassemble giant loading cranes. The idea is to cut them down one section at a time. But the crewmen are working carelessly and dangerously. Disaster is just seconds away. Men run for their lives as the massive structures crumble. The cause of the disaster is alarming. This video captures the steelworkers drinking during a break. This work party cost them their livelihoods. They're lucky it didn't end their lives. Jeju Island, Korea. A female skydiver's life hangs by a thread on high voltage lines. The college student was blown off course and got tangled in the deadly wires. She doesn't move for fear of touching two lines at the same time, which would mean certain death. The power company shuts down the electricity before rescuers move in with a crane. She keeps a tight grip and wraps her legs around the wire. If she falls from this height, the helmet won't help. Rescuers work carefully to free her. Finally, she's out and headed to solid ground. Not surprisingly, the young woman vows to give up skydiving for good. Copper Mountain, Colorado. Freestyle snowmobilers fly high at the Winter Gravity Games. Jay Quinlan pushes his machine to the limit.
Really what it comes down to is making the audience happy and thrilled. So, backflip is usually what people want to see.
But these 500-pound monsters are not meant to fly. It's a crushing blow from any angle. It was meant to be a backflip.
I just decided to go ahead and go with it. even though the conditions weren't right and the wind did pick up on me.
Jay's off to a good start. But then, a simple gust of wind.
A gust of wind had actually come up and blown directly at me. Therefore, I never completed the full rotation. I was completely stuck upside down the whole time.
Jay's 30 feet in the air. He knows he's in for a hard hit.
During that time, I was definitely thinking, you know, this is gonna be ugly. It's definitely gonna hurt.
He smashes his head at 40 miles an hour.
When I hit, I took the full force of the ice landing. The sound and the impact was really bad.
All right, hold on, ladies and gentlemen.
The medical team is quick on the scene. Jay's in tremendous pain. He fears this could be his last stunt ever.
I was afraid I might have actually been paralyzed.
Jay winds up with a shattered collarbone. It's a lucky break. This flip could have cost him his life.
I'm very fortunate to be alive. It's definitely a scary thought knowing upside down the consequences of 500 pounds over you and being smashed into the ice. I'm very fortunate.
All right, hold on, ladies and gentlemen.
Coming up, motorcycle stuntmen showboat for the crowd, but make a costly mistake. And a pulse-pounding pursuit comes to a crashing halt, but the drug-crazed driver refuses to surrender. Plus, a terrified woman climbs out on a ledge when she's trapped by a blazing inferno. As the world's most amazing videos returns.
Moscow, Russia. Motorcyclists take over the streets in the annual Bike Fest. One biker performs loops for the crowd, right in the path of an oncoming cycle. The two motorcycles crash head-on. One of the riders isn't getting up. Officials add a new vehicle to the mix, an ambulance. The bikers will recover. Unfortunately, this wasn't the kind of grand finale they had in mind. Salt Lake City, Utah. A desperate fugitive terrorizes the interstate in a dangerous high-speed pursuit. Officers fear the driver is high on heroin and cocaine.
At this point, we're still southbound I-15, coming up on 21st South.
Fleeing suspect pushes his speed to 80 miles an hour.
Salt Lake 382, he did not take the off ramp, still southbound on 15. We're in the emergency lane, he's weaving in and out of traffic.
Suddenly, he veers across 3 lanes of traffic.
We're headed over to the middle of the freeway, now we're in the HOV lane.
The madman is threatening the lives of everyone on the road. Troopers must stop him, now. An officer puts his life on the line when he rams the suspect's rear bumper.
It's all right, he just spun out.
The Jeep is sent spinning.
As if to take 215.
The suspect looks for an escape. But then, Watch again. The suspect spins but never stops moving. He's surrounded. It appears he's pinned. But he makes a sudden U-turn and smashes head-on into a cruiser. The suspect tries to flee on foot. He's finally wrestled to the ground. The criminal thought he could get away by turning the pursuit into a demolition derby. It's a race he had no chance of winning. Brooklyn, New York. Fire rages through an apartment building. Cheryl Johnson and her husband climbed out of the window. He made it to the roof. But Cheryl is stuck on the ledge, gripping his hand, and growing weaker by the second. Firefighter Joe Donatelli races to help.
When we arrived there, we heard screams in the courtyard.
Donatelli gets hooked to a rope and goes over the side. He finds Cheryl scared, exhausted, and about to lose her grip. She thinks she's going to die. The fireman's job is to convince her to let go of her husband and grab hold of him.
So I said, you have to let go of those people and you have to grab onto me. So, which was a tough moment for her, I believe.
Cheryl's not the only one who's nervous. It's Joe Donatelli's first rope rescue.
I'm like, all right, hopefully everything goes right. And if you have any sort of equipment failure, it's going to be ugly. So, but as soon as I got tied up, all those thoughts left my mind, and I was ready to, take care of business.
Cheryl bravely lets go. The firefighters on the roof quickly haul the two up to safety. The woman survives, thanks to a firefighter who risked his life to save hers.
Relieved. I knew something, we did a very good thing, and but I was relieved that me and her were both okay. We went through a lot up there.
Eugene, Oregon. Cowboys round up for a game of bull poker. The winner is the last man sitting at the table. But this isn't a friendly game of cards. Not when one of the players is a bull.
That's 2,000 pounds of horns and hair running around the arena, wanting to hit anything in its path.
The bull heads straight for Jason Guard. He's the first player hit. He's supposed to leave the game, but he doesn't. The angry bull tosses Jason end over end. Rodeo clowns save him from being ripped apart. Jason obviously isn't playing with a full deck.
I wanted to give a little bit to the audience and jump in there and do something crazy. It was probably not the smartest thing to do.
One mauling isn't enough for this cowboy. Jason takes his seat one more time.
You know the old saying, take the bull by the horns? You get hit in the dirt, you get kicked around, and you just got to get up and go back to it.
Jason isn't bluffing. Neither is the bull.
I looked up and his horns were coming at me and picked me out of all the other guys and hit me one more time.
Jason takes a beating
I actually blacked out for just a millisecond. It really didn't hurt. It knocked me a little bit kooky.
He's vowed never again to go heads up against a bull.
I'm retired from bull poker. If it is a sport, it's a stupid sport. The bull always wins.
These are some of the incredible true life stories of people who stared death in the face and lived to tell about it. Join us next time for more of the world's most amazing videos.